Welcome back to Reserved Investments, and thank you for joining me. Today, we're going to talk about the three main ways that money is made in the antiques and collectibles trade. Now, of course, if you are somebody that is worth like 100 million, 200 million, maybe you're worth $1 billion and you're watching this video right now. If that's you, you can probably afford to either invest in an already established grading company through private equity. You can probably also afford to invest in an auction house or an up-and-coming auction house. There's many different ways for somebody who has the means and the connections to make money in these markets. As I'm recording this video right now, there is a lot of money flowing through the antiques and collectibles trade through private equity, meaning there are very well-financed, very wealthy individuals that are coming in these markets, and they realize that there's a lot of Timmies, Kimmies, and Poindexters out there that don't know how these markets work, as we saw during the pandemic when everything was soaring to cloud nine heights. A lot of these individuals know that if they control a grading company or if they control an auction house, they are going to have a never-ending source of profit coming through these markets from the Timmies, Kimmies, and Poindexters that continue to bid these items up without understanding how these markets work, both over the short term and or over the long term. But for most of us, the three main ways that you make money in the antiques and collectibles trade is through flipping, speculation, or investment. Now, we have to have a candid conversation about this because there's still a lot of you that do not understand the difference between speculation and investment. I think most of you watching this video, I would guarantee that probably 90, 95, probably 99% of everybody watching this video, you know what flipping is. I'm still going to define it for you because it's important that we have this conversation before we go any further into talking about how to allocate capital towards the antiques and collectibles trade with the goal of making money in these markets, whether that be over the short term or over the long term. So without further ado, let's start by defining what flipping is. Let me give you two scenarios here, because people usually only think of one of these scenarios when I ask them to define what flipping is. So let me give you the common scenario that probably everybody can relate to. Let's say that you go to a garage sale and you come across a Nintendo Entertainment System with 20 games, and the person selling it only wants $20 for it. You give them the $20, you go home, you test it, it works perfectly. You immediately sell it or flip it on eBay, and you sell it for either $100, $150, depending on what the games are, or even $200 or more. That's a prime example of flipping, meaning short-term profit due to an immediate sale of an item that you bought. That's best definition I can give you. Another definition of flipping, though, and this is the one that very few people think of. Let's say that Nintendo is coming out with a limited edition product where if you don't pre-order it, you're not going to be able to get it. And you manage to pre-order the item, and after you get the item, you realize, you go on eBay, and you see you only paid $50 for this item, and people are willing to pay $200 or more for this thing that you just bought for $50 that was produced via mass-produced scarcity, meaning it's a modern era collectible that the company who produced it just limited production, and that's why it's selling for a premium on the secondary market. So you decide, you know what? I paid $50 for this item. I can flip it on eBay right now, and someone's going to give me $200. It's worth it. That's an example of flipping. You're taking that item, you're immediately able to sell it for a profit. So that is the second scenario when we talk about flipping that most people do not think of. That is an example of flipping. That is not to be confused with speculation. Now let's talk about speculation, because this is something else that the internet gurus get wrong. There are two types of speculation. There's short-term speculation, which is typically speculating on an item with the hopes it goes up in value, usually within a time period of 3 months all the way up to 5 years. When you get past 5 years, you could still be speculating on an item, but that is called long-term speculation. Now, let me give you an example of each. Suppose that you want to put your money in factory seal booster boxes of Pokemon cards and collectibles, products that are being made right now. So you wait until a box of Pokemon cards is ready to become discontinued, and you log on to any of the companies that sell this stuff online for a near wholesale price, and you buy either a case of those cards or you buy just one booster box. You get it shipped to you, and you put it in your closet, and you slowly watch the secondary market. And let's assume 1 year after that product being discontinued, prices start to rise on the secondary market. You decide to take that box, flip it onto the secondary market, and take your profit. That is an example of short-term speculation. The product and time, and also the risk level that you are undertaking, defines whether you are engaged in speculation versus that of investment. And I'm going to do a deeper dive on this in this very video. Now, before we go any further, I want to define what long-term speculation is. Let's suppose you're one of the Timmys, Kimmys, and Poindexters out there that does not understand opportunity cost, which we're going to also cover in this video, does not understand the time value money. And you come into my comment section, you go, Sean, you don't understand how popular Nintendo and video games are. I'm going to the store and I'm going to buy this right here copy of Super Mario RPG. I'm going to keep it factory sealed in my spare bedroom for the next 20 to 30 years because I truly believe in 20 to 30 years' time, this item is going to appreciate exponentially because younger generations that grew up with Super Mario RPG on the Switch, when they get older, they're going to want to pay a premium to own this. That is an example of a long-term speculation. It should not be confused with long-term investment in the antiques and collectibles trade, which is what we're going to talk about next. The reason why this should not be defined as long-term investment, this is a modern era item. As such, the market for this item is too new, it's too speculative, and we don't know the great unknown. We don't know just how many other people are hoarding this same exact product in factory sealed condition, waiting for the day that either the price shoots up on eBay or some of those individuals may be thinking, well, gee, vintage Nintendo games from the 1980s in factory sealed condition are worth money. Why won't my copy of Super Mario RPG released in 2024 for the Nintendo Switch be worth money? And the reason is simple, because a lot of people are now readily aware that factory sealed video games have a secondary market value. So more people are holding these items in factory sealed condition for the long term with the expectation that they're going to be able to make money on them. This is what sank a lot of other collecting categories, whether we're looking at Pez, Beanie Babies, Pogs. Atari video games are a great example. Everybody thought that factory sealed Atari video games that were being readily available through certain warehouse blowouts would be worth a lot of money in the future. And a lot of people went out there, they hoarded this stuff. And today, don't get me wrong, some of these items do sell for a premium, but it's nowhere near the returns in most cases of an S&P 500 index fund, which is what we're going to also talk about in this video, because when we look at investing in any type of antique or collectible, you also have to look at the opportunity cost, i.e. the time value of money that you are giving up to invest in an item like this with no underlying cash flow. So now let's talk about long-term investment in the antiques and collectibles trade, because this is where I recommend people park their money for the long term. Now, when we talk about investing in antiques and collectibles, there's a right way to do it and there's a wrong way to do it. Wrong way to do it would be to go and buy a copy of Super Mario RPG, put it on a shelf factory seal for 30 years, and hope that it goes up in value simply because you think everybody loves Nintendo, everybody loves Mario, and the people that grew up with this game, they're going to want to pay a premium for it 20 to 30 years from now. Again, long-term speculation is not to be confused with proper long-term investment in the antiques and collectibles trade. Now, what defines one of the key differences between speculation and investment? Well, obviously, it's the type of item we're investing into over the long term. Let me give you some great examples of items where if you buy right, you understand the risks, you understand the markets, you can make money investing in them over the long term. Here's some great examples. I'm going to name some of these markets. I'm going to start on the antique side of the equation, and we're going to go all the way across to the collectible side of the equation. First up, we have historical documents. If you don't know what a historical document is, look to the U.S. Constitution. An original copy of the U.S. Constitution is probably one of the most historical, hardcore, valuable items you can find in the entire antiques and collectibles trade outside the realm of high-end investment art. That's a prime example of a market that you can invest in over the long term. Let me give you some more. Investment-grade art. I already brought that up. If you have the money, you have the resources, you understand how that market works, it's a great market to invest in over the long term. Antique furniture. Now, to be fair, I know I'm going to have critics watching this channel, so I'll say it myself. Antique furniture is not a good market at present time, simply because there's a lot of uncertainty in that market. There was a time when a lot of antique furniture was selling for record prices. Today, in the year 2024, it's hit or miss. You really have to understand the market and realize that if you are investing in a lot of these pieces that have come down in price over the last few years since their 1990s highs, you're probably going to have to hold those items for many, many years before you see a return on that investment. Another market we talk an awful lot about on this channel, first edition collectible books. My first edition copy of The Great Gatsby is an excellent example of this market. This is a market that if you buy right, you understand the risks, you can make money over the long term. It is much better to put your money in markets like this than an item like this and sit on it for 30 years, guys. Let's continue. Another market on the antique side of the equation, antique firearms and edged weapons. If you understand the ins and outs of this market, you understand the nuances, you know how it works, you know how to identify working firearms, you know how to store them and maintain them properly, this can be a market for you. Now, all those markets that I just brought up, the one disadvantage they have, there's no third-party grading. So if you want to go to the market, you want to buy a historical document, you really have to know what you're doing. You have to buy through a trusted dealer. You have to buy through a trusted auction house. Or you yourself have to have a lot of intimate, intense knowledge so that you don't make a mistake and get slapped in the face with a stale donut. So now let's talk about markets where third-party grading exists. We have markets like graded coins. We have markets like graded paper money. We have markets like graded sports cards, antique and vintage. We have markets like vintage toys. Vintage comic books can be graded. Vintage video games are now being graded, as we talk an awful lot about on this channel. Even vintage collectible card games, whether it be Pokemon or Magic the Gathering, pick your poison. These are markets that you can invest in long term. Long term meaning 10 years or more. Because here's the secret to investing in the antiques and collectibles trade. You got to remember, guys, there are no underlying cash flows on any of this stuff. It's all based on the greater fool theory. So if I'm going to park $10,000 in an antique or collectible, and I want to invest in it over the long term, I'm going to hedge my bets. Meaning, I'm going to utilize a strategy that I talk about a lot on this channel that still some of you do not understand, so I'm going to explain it again. If I'm going to invest in a graded collectible, what I'm going to do is I'm going to mitigate my risk. I'm going to go to the population reports that are put out by AFA, CGC, PCGS, PSA, whatever the grading company is. And I'm going to scour those reports. And I'm going to look for scarce items. And I'm also going to look, when I analyze the markets for those scarce items, what items are in what I call the optimal collecting grade. Now, if you Google the optimal collecting grade right now, believe it or not, the top search on this talking point is by me. It's actually through an article that I wrote through Antiques and Auction News that is entitled, "Is Buying the Best Always the Best Advice?" A simple definition of the optimal collecting grade is, it's the grade at which a third-party graded collectible can be purchased that is a steep discount from a similar collectible that is one grade above it. That's how we use the optimal collecting grade to our advantage. See, guys, this is really what we need to discuss. When you invest in these markets, what you are doing is you are competing against the time value of money. Because at the end of the day, the yearly average return on an S&P 500 index fund going back 30 years is 10.52%. That means over the last 30 years, if you would have done nothing but invest in an S&P 500 index fund, which is completely passive, you don't have to do anything. You don't have to maintain, insure. You don't have to contact auction companies, do market research. If you're investing in an S&P 500 index fund, it is completely passive. And you would have got a yearly average return of just over 10%, almost 11%. That includes the 2008 financial crisis. That includes any of the recessions we had in that 30-year period. That is the yearly return on just investing in an S&P 500 index fund. When we invest in antiques and collectibles, especially over the long term, you need to understand the opportunity cost involved and the time value of money that you are giving up because you are not putting your money in that type of asset with underlying cash flows. This is what I've been preaching since the beginning on this channel. This is why all the Timmies and Kimmies that attack me in the comment section and tell me, "Sean, you don't understand. Everybody loves Nintendo. Everybody loves Pokemon. It's all going to go to the moon." You need to have a plan in place when you allocate resources to these markets. Now, one of the rules that I give a lot of people, a lot of my clients, when I offer consulting to a lot of the people that come to me, I tell them, if you're going to invest long-term in any of the markets that I just read to you, on the antique side of the trade or the collectible side of the trade, you have to be willing to hold the item for a minimum of 10 years or more. Now, there are exceptions to every rule. Let's say that right around 2018, 2019, you went into the marketplace for vintage comic books and you started going after key vintage comic books. Then the pandemic hit. The government gave every living being pretty much free money, whether it was the $3,000, $1,200 stimulus checks or the PPP loans, and the prices of a lot of collectibles started soaring. If you would have came to me and utilized my consulting services back in 2020, 2021 during the pandemic, and you would have said, "Sean, I don't know what to do here. I bought all of these items. I have a massive comic book collection that I paid $30,000 for, and now it's worth $90,000. I would have told you to sell, because you always sell into the hype. When you're dealing with asset classes with no underlying cash flows, these markets are governed by the greater fool theory alone. As soon as you can take a profit that you're comfortable with, you take it. You don't wait to see where the market's going to be 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years down the line. This is why the type of mentality that the average Timmy, Kimmy, or Poindexter has, who's going to take a factory sealed game like this, put it on a shelf, and speculate on it for the next 20 to 30 years, I'm here to tell you, they do not understand how the collectibles marketplace operates over the short term or over the long term, nor do they understand how finance works, how money moves through our own economy. That is the core of collectible finance. You have to understand how the collectibles and antiques market operates, and you also have to have an understanding, a basic understanding of economics and finance. That is why I do these videos. If you got something out of this video, please let me know in the comment section below. I am going to expand on this knowledge. We're going to do more videos like this, guys, because it's very important that people understand there are only 3 ways for most individuals to make money in these markets. That is flipping, speculation, and investing. And unfortunately, most people that make mistakes in these markets, they do not understand the difference between speculation and investment, especially when we define short-term speculation versus long-term speculation versus investment in these markets. If you can learn this, you're going to be several steps ahead of the average Timmy, and Poindexter out there. And let me give you a little secret here. You can make a lot of money understanding those core concepts. Like I told you guys before when we talk about my background, you want to know where I got my money? I simply went to the market. I was buying Atari systems with like 10 games back during the pre-Nintendo video game boom, like right around 1999, year 2000. I would buy an Atari for $20 with like 50 games. I would flip it on eBay for several hundred at that particular point in time. I would take the profit and I would invest it in an S&P 500 index fund. So what I was doing is I was making money immediately by flipping this stuff. I was taking the profits and I was putting it into a other asset class that has underlying cash flows over the long term. That's how you make money in these markets. It's one of the easiest ways. And it's a shame because before I end this video, I got to point this out. There's a lot of people on like the eBay Thrifters Facebook group. There's a lot of people in that market. They can kill it in these markets. They can go and identify items. They can flip it and they can make a profit. The problem is they don't know how to properly allocate or invest the profits that they're making over the long term. Collectible finance is 2 unique parts. It's understanding the collectibles marketplace, but it's also understanding economics and finance that makes up that marketplace and understanding how capital is allocated over the long term so you can become financially independent in your later years. If any of this information interests you, please consider subscribing to this channel. Again, feel free to Google optimal collecting grade, and you should see an article that was published in Antiques and Auction News that was written by yours truly that talks about, is buying the best always the best advice? I always told you guys, buying the highest graded collectible is usually never the best advice from a financial investment perspective. Thank you for watching. Have a great night. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and I will see you in the next video.